My name is Dr. Maithili Ganju. I'm a professor of advertising at Manav Rachna, Faridabad. Welcome to my class. This is a class where we are going to understand the agency functions, and that too, two very important pillars of advertising, which is client servicing and account planning. Before I move to talk about these functions, I would briefly like to talk about the advertising agency culture. Agency culture is a very interesting term that we often use because it tells you what and how an agency works. It talks about the social values, it talks about the expectations, and it talks about the style in which work is conducted. For any institution to be understood, understanding culture is very important before you talk about the roles that various people perform. Advertising, as we know today, is a modern industrial concept. However, historically speaking, advertising has been in the society for a very long time, almost the ancient India. But it was only in the 19th century when, from being a simple information providing activity, it turned to persuasive communication, and it was able to establish itself in an industrial world as a conduit between the seller or the advertiser and the buyer or the consumer. So advertising came to India essentially from the global land, because it was somewhere in the 19th century that in the United States we had advertising agencies being set up, and it was that industrial phase where a lot of brands grew and a lot of brands came to India via our colonial rulers, which is the Britishers. So needless to say, to begin with, advertising in India was about the products or about the brands that were foreign, and it was even led by the Britishers themselves. So mainly in India, they would just be doing what we today might loosely call the media placement. Now this fact is important for us to understand because it sets a tone and tonality to what was to follow as the technology and media revolution began, and as advertising grew from being just a means to be informing people about a product to a very sophisticated tool of communicating with various segments of the society and selling brands and making brands successful as they are today. So, when we talk of advertising in the 19th century and by the turn of the 20th century also, there are two important things that were happening. Number one, we had the Britishers or even Americans who were at the helm of affairs, even in India, and this went on till the 1960s, even after we got our independence. And the second thing was that because Indian market started more like a media placement situation and slowly grew into having its own agencies, there was the whole emphasis on doing creative work and doing lilting writing and doing interesting, attention-grabbing, memorable advertising. This particular phenomena is something that we recognize even today. The way a common person looks at the advertising is really through the advertisements that are seen, through the communication which is it is something that is memorable, it is attractive, it is something that stays on. So that's how a layperson looks at advertisements. But advertising and the industry is much, much more than that. And that is what we are going to be talking about. So while the creative appeals were something that were looked into, as we grew into the 1970s and management and marketing became a part of the industrialized world that we had stepped into, we had import of these specializations into the agencies also. And thus began the era when we were talking about the market research, we were talking about the consumer behavior, we were also talking about management skills, and we were talking about strategies that started to get into the process of advertising, the process of communicating messages from an advertiser to a consumer. And with this also came a discipline and a kind of structure which got parallel with the creative mindset that was already there, and thus the advertising agencies began to grow. By the 80s and the 90s, after the liberalization, the agencies have been a very important part of the media growth, of the growth of the industries, of the growth of the brands themselves. And today, as we speak, coming out of the COVID lockdown and the economic sort of going down, we see advertising industry taking the leaps and bounds of growing. We see digital media emerging as a very important sort of vehicle which is growing at the rate of 15%, and we see a lot of media activities and advertising pulling the economy in a certain direction. Therefore, it's important to understand that these brands, the advertisers, they are in the business of selling brands, they are in the business of making profit, and these are the people who finance what we understand as advertising. And of course, the most important person, the king in this entire dynamics, is the consumer herself or himself. The consumer is the one who drives, consumer is the one who buys, the consumer is the one who actually makes this entire thing happen. I have put up on the screen this interesting model that I have put for you, where the point that is being made is that the entire advertising is really about an advertiser who has a brand or a product or a service that wants to get into the market, and this person is directly trying to talk to the consumer in terms of wanting a particular interaction to happen, a particular transaction to happen, which is the transaction of the consumer being convinced to buy the product. So between the advertiser and the consumer, there is a dotted line that I have put, which tells you that the connect is between these two important entities, where advertising and the agency really comes in the middle as a service industry, trying to take the message from the advertiser, convert it into a language with the help of media and technology and a lot of creativity within, to convert it into a very palatable, understandable and persuasive communication that goes to the consumer, who in turn is convinced that the communication is worth giving that try of buying and is able to make the transaction. Therefore, important to understand that advertising agency essentially works like a service industry, where it takes the advertiser's input, the advertiser's intention, converts them into messages, passes them through the media vehicles with the help of technology, and sends it off to the consumer, who in turn is able to grasp and understand those messages and make the transaction, thus closing the loop. For an advertiser, it is very important that the messages are understood and convert into a transaction. And for a consumer, it's very important that the messages fulfill the needs and the transaction happens, and it happens again and again. And that is how the advertising agency helps in creating a market, creating an economy, and creating a business for itself. Some of the pictures that I have put up here is to sum up the point that I am trying to make, that advertising agency, being a service industry, is an interesting place where the art of advertising happens, where the science of collecting this information happens, and ultimately the commerce, which is money making, is at the bottom of the whole environment. The important fact, therefore, is that in an agency you have a lot of teamwork, you have a lot of hard work. You have a lot of working together, winning together. The right hand side picture is really about winning awards. So it's about trophies and awards, it's about a lot of good work, it's a lot about teamwork, and what they do is what we are going to understand as we move forward. I start by talking about the stages in a account management. So the entire situation in an agency is such that it all begins when you win a particular business pitch, which means that brands hold pitches. That means they express what they want to do. If they have a campaign that is ready for the brand. So for example, we would have Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut has decided that this year they want to launch now new varieties, and they want to tell their customers about it. They also have decided that they need to increase their market share, and therefore they would call a business pitch. In the business pitch, normally the agency which is already working and is working well with the brand gets the opportunity to do so. But sometimes if the client feels that they want to have some new ideas, they want to throw it open to others, it may become a competitive bid. So several agencies get together and basis their own understanding, their own research, they put in a proposal, they go and win a pitch, and that becomes the beginning of a particular cycle. The business pitch results in the agency, one of the agency getting the business, and then the work in the agency starts. So the whole work starts when you win a business pitch. In the business pitch, various agencies can come and compete, or an agency which is already with the brand would come and redo it. The idea of having a business pitch is to be able to satisfy the advertiser that the agency has understood what is expected of them and is able to handle it in a very good fashion. Business pitch leads to strategy development. Strategy development again is where a strategic planner comes in and comes out with the ideas, comes out with the objectives, which is something that we are going to see later. It is the strategic planner who leads it on to a creative person or a creative group, and the creative group later takes on from the planner and makes a creative strategy and the creative production, which leads on to making of the creative products, which are then handed over to the planner. Planner would look at where these products are going to be fitted in terms of the media vehicles, and thereafter the launch of the campaign happens. Now the launch of the campaign is something that is not the end of the entire journey, because it is the launch and the impact of that launch which is going to determine what happens to the pitch the next year. If the client is happy with what has been done in the year and sees the impact of his brand the way the marketing objective wanted it to, then the agency may get the pitch without any competition. But if there is a problem, then it can be again opened up to the bid. In a nutshell, if we look at the agency, there are really three big C's that we are dealing with. There is the client, the main important entity in the life of an agency, which is the client whose brand needs to be serviced, the client whose brand has to go out with its messaging, the client with whom there is a very important relationship, because it is on the basis of the funding that you get from the client that the agency is able to function, not only in terms of its everyday functioning, but also in terms of its work satisfaction, in its opportunity to do good work, work which is recognized globally and gets awards. So the entire the the zeal and the enthusiasm with which an agency works depends on client and good clients, clients who have good brands, brands that really become successful. On the other hand, a brand becomes successful only if the consumer is happy. So, the second important C in a life of an agency is a consumer. Now, consumer is a heterogeneous group of people. This is people at large, people like you and me, people who have a choice. And today's world, they are the kings. They are the people who are going to decide that in this market where I have ample of choice, which brand is the brand that I want to associate with, which is the brand that I want to buy, which is the brand I want to repurchase and live with and build my loyalty around. Therefore, the consumer and the understanding of who this consumer is another very important duty that the agency has to perform. And last but not the least, the really purpose and the backbone of the agency is the creativity that it brings on table. Because as we know that there are several brands and there are several consumers. What attracts a consumer to the brand has a lot to do with the creative, persuasive space within which the two are interacting. And this is where the roles of advertising agency get defined. We start with understanding what client servicing function is. Now, as I said, the client is very important, which means the advertiser is very important, which means the brand and the owner of the brand is very important. The importance of this person lies at two levels. One, at the level of an interaction with the people there. And the second thing is the interaction with the brand. Now, for the client, it's very important that the agency that it is interacting with should be an agency that owns the brand and nurtures the brand and makes the brand look good. And therefore, it's a relationship like it's a relationship between the parent and the teachers, where both the parents and the teachers are supposed to be equally investing so that the child grows up with the right exposure. Similarly, here the client expects that the agency is going to do that job, and hey, who's the person who leads that? It's the client servicing person. So the core management of the team, which is the face of the agency to the client, is a client servicing team. Now, client servicing team invariably is the largest part of the agency, and there are people at various hierarchies. People at the top are the management. So, invariably it's the servicing people who get down to becoming the heads of the agency, although that's not a rule. An interesting case that we have in hand is of our great Piyush Pandey. Piyush Pandey, who of course started as a servicing person many years ago when he was a young advertiser, later switched to creative, and he was the head of the creative team. But it is in that role that he excelled so much that later he became the head of the agency, and now of course he is internationally heading Ogilvy. So there are exceptions, but generally speaking, it is the servicing people who get down to becoming the heads. So when you are the manager and the head, you are the person who is really dealing with money, you are dealing with clients, where you are dealing with the business aspect more profoundly than the other partners within an agency. Which is not to say that they do not involve themselves with the internal going about. Absolutely they do. They deal of course with the financial aspects, they lead the business, they develop the portfolio of the company, they coordinate with the people and the processes, they are the face to the outside, to the brand world or to the world at large, and they are also the problem solvers for the insiders. Now, the insiders are really the creative people, the planning people, the production people, and even the vendors with whom the agency works very closely for certain aspects that may come up during the brand journey. So, the servicing person basically takes all the calls on who is going to be doing what, how much is to be paid, what kind of choices have to be made in order to get the brand on the way of the campaign development. This is essentially true because the campaign on a particular brand needs a custodian who knows exactly what is good for the brand, and that job is a servicing job. So while they are the representatives of the agency to the client, they are also the client's person in the agency. They also are the ones who basically control and also hold back and have what we call the bird's eye view of the brand development. When we look at the skill set, therefore, here is what we look for in a good client servicing person: sharp business acumen. A team leader has to be a person who is really a people's person, who is approachable, he's a good listener. That's one of the very important personality or a skill that a good servicing person ought to have. Has to be someone who's proactive on the account and is able to quickly turn around any wishes that may come from the client. Not only the wishes, many times it is expected that if there is a problem that the servicing person experiences or notices is happening, there should be the first person to raise it to the client and get a solution. For example, if the brand has a little image issue, it should be the servicing person who would quickly take a decision of bringing in the PR team and make this suggestion to the client, take the approvals and get the PR going. Or if there is a problem in the community, in the market, then it is the servicing person who should be quickly noticing it, reporting it back and getting a quick fix done. So therefore, a person who is very proactive, person who has a vision, insight and is able to network with people and organize various situations and people together. Most importantly, inside, it is the servicing person who is a buddy to the planner. The two of them are partners because while the servicing person has a support on understanding the market from the planner, the ultimate decisions on what is to be done are the servicing persons. Most importantly, at the time of pitch, when the planning is leading the entire operation, the servicing is equal sort of stakeholder. Apart from the business side, the financial side, they also are the ones who will decide on what the positioning is going to be and how the two of them together are going to be representing the brand. Going further, even with the media strategists, servicing is the partner. So servicing really is a fulcrum around which all the other functions do work and ultimately take their okays from. So that brings us to the second important role, which is that of an account planner. Who is an account planner? Now, the interesting story about the account planner is that an account planner is just about 52 years old in this whole setup of advertising. And it was again Stephen King in WPP, which is now WPP and those days was JWT in London, who came up with this idea of having somebody within an agency who is like a thought leader. Therefore, account planning has a specialized role which again not every agency may have. In some agencies the servicing doubles up as a planning, but in good agencies which spend a lot of time on research and understanding the consumer, the second god in the whole setup, they lay a lot of emphasis on an account planner. Account planner therefore is a thought leader, a strategist with a keen eye on research and on critical evaluation. These are people who are more in tune with the consumer than even the advertisers are. They have a deep understanding of what the consumer's current perception is, how the consumer behaves, what are the kind of expectations they have, and most importantly, how the consumer is behaving or interacting with the brand at the time of the pitch or at the time of the development of any brand campaign. They are the people who are able to predict the consumer's relationship in the future, and basis that they are able to make their strategy. These are people who do a lot of research for the brand, of the brand, for the competing brands. Over a period of time, planning is like an asset that gets accumulated over years with years and years of experience and years of having worked in a particular category, in a particular discipline, be it brands, be it social marketing. So these are people who are really go-to in the sense of knowing the facts and figures on which advertising actually rests. So researching and insights mining, again a strategic planner, they evolve from the data collection stage to insight mining stage, the analysis. From the huge numbers, from the huge data collected, they are able to find that one little insight which goes missing otherwise, in order to pull out what is called the trigger for a change in the mind of a consumer. They are catalysts for the creative strategy, therefore, because it is the planner who actually works very closely with the creative team. Now, one thing about the creative team which you would have learned probably is that creative team works in its own zone. They are people who cannot be told too much. They have to be told less and very few important things. You have to simply be able to tell them the hard facts, the hard data that is found otherwise. And this is again a job of a planner. It is planner's role to be able to bring out from the whole world of knowledge those important nuggets with which the creative is going to run. A very important attribute that a planner needs to have, and it is becoming very important today, is be socially sensitive. Be it issues like environment, the gender, the marginal communities, any such issues are very important so that the planner is able to say and do messages and media vehicles that are not offensive to anyone, that don't get into any kind of bad press. That is a very important aspect. So right from data crunching to becoming a social anthropologist, becoming a repository of the culture and the values so that you can get close to the consumer, understand their viewpoint, and to brainstorming with the creative directors in order to get it all right, that is what a planning person's job is. Now if you look at the skill set, passionate readers and researchers. This is the first thing that you always look for a planner. A researcher is someone who should know the data, should know the insights, should have understanding of perceptions, somebody who knows closely the pulse of the consumer. Also should be able to predict trends, know the fashion, look at the alternate and well-versed vocabulary, should be able to craft words, should be able to aid the creative thinking, should be able to use the choicest words which lilt a writer to write a good copy. So these are the things that are very important. Apart from that, analytical mind, a non-judgmental personality, open to new ideas, even to bizarre ones, because ideation is one process where you cannot be structured. It's a process where you have to let the creative person absolutely free. So it is in that context that the planner who is going to be guarding and understanding and molding the creative person has to show that kind of tolerance and acceptability of new ideas. Then again, being a team player. In fact, being a team player is the most important skill set for anybody who wants to work in an agency. Whichever role, you have to be a team player. You cannot be somebody who works alone, because advertising never happens because of one person. Advertising is one profession where the whole team has to always come together to give a good product. So in terms of job, it is the planner who leads the pitch and leads the strategies to the client, is able to convince the client, because many times the client learns from the account planner, and that is the kind of regard that a good planner is able to get for herself or himself. In an Indian context, we know Santosh Desai. He's so well understood, so well read because of that analytical social anthropologist view that he brings on table whenever he's talking about any brand. We will now quickly look at a few planning tools. Before I show you a couple of planning tools, let me make you understand what it means to have a planning tool. Now, one thing that has been told to you is that a planner's job is to gather data, is to collect a lot of data and get it all together in one place. Now, from here, when you have too much information, it is very important that the planner is able to sift out the right information, the relevant portions, and then send it across to the creative team and even talk about those things in the strategy. So, in order to distill that good stuff, the relevant stuff, the stuff which is going to help in strategy, in building an excellent campaign, the planner usually uses certain tools. And these tools help to sift this information. One of the tools that I have picked up here is what we call a media message matrix. What happens here is that we have certain nomenclatures like who the audience is, what is their current behavior and attitude towards the brand, what is the desired attitude and behavior that we want from this consumer, and what are the barriers to that particular behavior or that particular attitude. Then you move on to understanding, so what should I tell? What is the key message that I want to give to this consumer about my brand? We also have channels as in what are the media channels, who are the people, that kind of media management with which I am going to reach out to the consumer. And last but not the least, you do a selection of specific tools, specific media vehicles that you think as a planner are going to be best in carrying those messages. Remember, the strategic planner can only propose. Finally, the choice of the communication tools and even the communication channels, it resides with the media planner. Okay, so I have given an example here. For example, this is a particular campaign from a social communication point of view, where we are looking at, here is another tool. This is called Orbit of Influence. Here we track our audiences in such a way that they are able to, we are able to understand how their lifestyle goes. So this is an example from a social, from a rural project really, where we are trying to see that if we are reaching this farmer who's in the center, what are the various places where we can find this customer. And therefore, we talk about a village chopal, we talk of a kirana shop, we talk about a field, a tea stall. This is how a planner is able to set out all these platforms where some media activity can be done, so that the message that may be given to this farmer, say from the fertilizer company, say from the tractor companies, or any other brand that has to do with the farmer and his life, they can approach him through these media points. So before suggesting the media points, this kind of tool helps the planner to put it all together. Last but not the least is this creative tool which is called the creative brief. A creative brief is the most important planning tool which is actually sent out to the creative team. As I was telling you, creative team has very little patience to listen to everything that is being said about the brand. Therefore, ultimately through the tools, the planning person actually intends to draw out all the information into this one page within those 3 or 4 sparkling lines to be able to excite the creative person to do his or her best. So the creative brief very briefly talks about what the problem is, who are the people we are talking to, what kind of work, tasking is, what is the objective, what is the communication going to do, and then you talk about what is it that's going to make the consumer do what they want them to do, and what are those nuggets that are required for the creative person to do that persuasion. So a creative brief is a very important tool that the planning person has to be able to fill in and talk about. In fact, in the agency parlance, we often say that a good advertisement or a good campaign has a very good creative brief. So the credit of the planner is really in making an excellent brief, which results in a very good campaign. That's all for today. I hope you understood the importance of an agency in terms of its culture and the roles that the two significant pillars within the agency play: a client servicing and the account planner. Thank you.